In the autumn of 1982, my husband, David Miller, was awarded a third-class merit. The entire regiment organized a 12-table victory banquet to celebrate his achievement, yet no one bothered to inform me. By the time I rushed back, the party had long since ended. Not a single scrap of food was left on the stove. Even the leftovers had been divided among his fellow soldiers. Mary, the widow of a fallen soldier, sat in the main house holding a bowl of chicken soup. Her daughter was perched on David's shoulders, chewing on the milk candy I had bought and brought home for my own daughter, Lily. Meanwhile, Lily was crouching by the kitchen door, gnawing on a piece of cold, hard bread. David glanced at me and said indifferently, "You're back? Mary is due to give birth soon. Give her a hand." In my past life, I wouldn't have dared to disobey. He was a respected officer. My mother-in-law used filial piety to suppress me, and because Mary was the relative of a martyr, the entire neighborhood took her side. For 20 years, I was shackled by the accusation of being unreasonable and difficult. It wasn't until I lay in a hospital hallway dying of terminal stomach cancer that I learned from a neighbor's gossip that Mary's 2 children were actually David's. When I died, he didn't even come home. Having been born again, I reached down and took the cold bread from my daughter's hand. I pulled out a fresh piece of cake I had brought, stood up, and looked him in the eye. "David, I want a divorce." The main house fell into a sudden silence. The bowl of chicken soup in Mary's hand clattered against the edge of the table, spilling half its contents. The little girl on David's shoulders let out a loud wail. David set the child down, handed her to Mary, and strode toward the kitchen door. He was in his military uniform, his collar unbuttoned at the top, frowning at me exactly as he had in my previous life. "What did you say?" "A divorce," I repeated. I didn't stand up immediately. I remained crouched, wiping the cake crumbs from the corners of Lily's mouth. I think I made myself clear. David froze for 3 seconds before letting out a cold laugh. "Sarah, have you lost your mind?" My mother-in-law rushed out from the inner room, still carrying a bowl of red date and silver ear soup she had prepared for Mary. "Divorce? Do you think you can just walk in and out of the Miller family whenever you please?" I ignored her. I stood up, brushed the dust off my knees, and looked directly at David. In my past life, I had cried, I had caused scenes, and I had even knelt before this man. In return, I was always met with his impatient sigh as he rubbed his temples, as if every tear I shed was merely a nuisance. "Tomorrow, I'm going to the Civil Affairs Bureau." I took Lily's hand to walk out, but David grabbed my arm, squeezing so hard my bones ached. In my past life, I would have endured it. He was a soldier, a man of merit, and the whole county said I was lucky to have such a good husband. If I didn't endure, what else could I do? But in this life, I threw his hand off. "Touch me again, and I'm going straight to your unit's political department." David went stiff. The thing he valued most in this world was that uniform. I had never used it to threaten him before, and he couldn't believe those words had come from my mouth. Mary stepped out of the house holding her child, her eyes red and her voice soft and fragile. "Sister-in-law, is this because of me? If I've made you unhappy, I'll just leave." In my past life, the moment she said that, David would fly into a rage, accusing me of being too petty to accommodate others. Then Mary would cry, my mother-in-law would scold me, and eventually I would bow my head and apologize, a cycle that repeated countless times. This time I'd even bother to respond. I led Lily out the gate, leaving behind my mother-in-law's curses and Mary's perfectly timed sobs. Lily looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, where are we going?" "To Grandma's house." As we reached the end of the alley, I glanced back. David was standing at the gate, silhouetted against the light, so I couldn't see his face. He didn't chase after us. It was exactly as I expected. The walk from the Miller house to my parents' home was a 40-minute trek over dirt roads. Halfway there, Lily couldn't walk anymore. I knelt down to carry her on my back. The 5-year-old was terrifyingly light, weighing even less than the backpack I had carried home from the city. In my past life, it was always like this. Since she was small, she never had enough to eat or warm clothes to wear. Any good food in the house was always prioritized for Mary and her children. Chicken soup, eggs, brown sugar. Even new clothes for the new year were picked over by Mary and her daughter first. I had tried to fight for her once. That time, Mary's daughter and Lily both had fevers, and there was only 1 dose of medicine left. My mother-in-law gave it to Mary's child, saying the descendant of a martyr couldn't be allowed to have an accident. I carried a burning hot lily and ran 3 miles to the clinic, but by the time we arrived, she was already having convulsions. When David found out, what did he say? Mary's child has a weak constitution. As a mother, how can you not see the bigger picture? That night, as I sat in the yard holding Lily, I felt for the first time that this marriage was hopeless. But even without hope, I couldn't leave. My mother-in-law used guilt to weigh me down. The neighbors used the martyr's family reputation to persuade me, and David only had to say I was unreasonable to turn the whole community against me. Back then, I didn't know the law or how to get a divorce, nor did I know if divorcing a soldier was even possible. Back then, I knew nothing but how to cry. This life is different. I spent 4 years studying at the Provincial Teachers College. Before graduation, I was offered a teaching position at a high school in the province. In my past life, I gave up that spot to return home and care for Mary. In this life, I haven't breathed a word of it to David. The dean said he would hold the position for me until the end of the month. I still have 12 days. When we reached my parents' house, my father was in the yard chopping wood. When he saw me carrying Lily, the axe nearly slipped from his hand and hit his foot. "Sarah? Aren't you supposed to be in the city?" "Dad," I said, "I'm going to divorce David." The wood in my father's hand dropped to the ground, and my mother stuck her head out from the kitchen. My mother was overjoyed to see Lily, but the moment she heard the word divorce, her face turned deathly pale. "Are you crazy? David is an officer. So many people would kill for a husband and a family like that. He's raising another woman and her child in our house," I said, as I set Lily down and told her to go to the kitchen to find something to eat. Lowering my voice, I continued, "And he's demanding that I come back to serve that woman while she's in labor." My mother froze. My father slowly stood up, his face as grim as iron. "Are you telling the truth?" "It's the absolute truth." After a long silence, my father drove his axe deep into the ground. "Mother, stop crying. Our daughter is home. Go slaughter a chicken." Early the next morning, I went to the County Civil Affairs Bureau. It was just a single room with 2 desks and faded slogans pasted on the walls. The clerk recognized me. "Oh, Sarah? What brings you here?" "A divorce." He pushed up his glasses. "Your husband is Captain Miller from the local unit, right? Has he arrived yet?" "Not yet. I'm just here to ask about the process first." The clerk flipped through a stack of files with an awkward expression. "A divorce requires both parties to be present and sign. Your husband is a serviceman. Military marriages are protected by law. If only the wife proposes a divorce unilaterally, it isn't supported." Military marriage. Those 2 words had locked me away for a lifetime in my past life. But I had once pored over the marriage laws in the provincial library. The law protects the marriage when the soldier is unwilling to divorce, meaning the wife cannot unilaterally file a lawsuit unless the soldier has committed a serious fault. "What if the soldier is at fault?" I asked. "For example, if he is cohabiting with another person." The clerk's hand paused for a moment, and he looked up. My expression was perfectly calm. He cleared his throat. "Do you have evidence?" I smiled slightly without answering and turned to walk out. David would never agree to a divorce voluntarily. It wasn't out of love for me, but for the sake of his reputation. It wouldn't look good for a decorated officer to be divorced by his wife. Moreover, he still needed me, his legal wife, to act as a smokescreen so he could legitimately raise Mary and her children in the house. In my past life, I was that shameful rag used to cover his mess. Even after 20 years of being torn and tattered, he hadn't bothered to replace me. It wasn't until I died that he finally promoted Mary to the position of official wife. Standing in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I thought for a moment before heading to the post office. I wrote 2 letters. One was to the dean at the provincial college, confirming my job assignment. The other was to my classmate, Claire White. After graduation, she had been assigned to the provincial radio station, and her husband worked at the court. In my past life, I was too afraid of bothering others and carried all my hardships alone. In this life, I've wised up. If a connection can be used, use it. If strength can be borrowed, borrow it. I wasn't stealing or robbing, I was simply refusing to be a victim anymore. After mailing the letters, I stood at the post office entrance. The August sun was fierce and glaring. Across the street, in front of the state-owned grocery store, a man in a military uniform was crouching. It was David's orderly, Joe. He came scurrying over, his face plastered with a grin, though his voice carried a hint of condescension. Sister-in-law, the captain told me to give you a message. Come home quickly. Mary's due date is almost here, and the house can't be without someone to help. In my past life, this man had frequently fabricated stories about me in front of David. Sister-in-law is narrow-minded and can't tolerate others. Poor Mary is so pitiful. Why can't sister-in-law be more generous? I looked at Joe and smiled. Go back and tell David, if Mary is having a baby, find a midwife. Don't look for me. I'm a teacher, not a doula. Joe's mouth hung open, choked into silence. I didn't look at him again. I walked into the supply store and bought 2 pounds of brown sugar and a bag of powdered milk. The sugar was for my mother, and the milk was for Lily. From now on, I would only serve the people I actually cared about. When I got back to my parents' house, I mixed a bowl of milk for Lily. She held the porcelain mug and drank it down, gulp by gulp. When she finished, she even used her tongue to lick around the rim of the cup. Watching her, my nose stung with an unbearable ache. In my past life, all the powdered milk in the house went to Mary's children. My mother-in-law would say, they don't have a father, we can't let their stomachs suffer. But what about my Lily? Her father was alive and well, yet her life was worse than that of a fatherless child. I knelt down and wiped the milk smudge from Lily's face. Lily, Mommy wants to take you somewhere very, very far away. There's a big school there and lots of other children. Do you want to go? Lily nodded. She hesitated for a moment and then asked, Is Daddy going? No, neither is Mary. Lily thought for a while, set down the porcelain mug, and wrapped her arms around my neck. Wherever Mommy goes, Lily goes. In the afternoon, my father went out for a while. When he returned, he was carrying a cloth bundle. He opened it to reveal a stack of cash and some stamps. Sarah, this is the money saved for your brother's wedding. Take it for now. Once you're settled in the city, you can pay it back. Don't be a stranger with your own father. He then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. I went to see Accountant Zhao this afternoon. His daughter works at the County Women's Federation. She handles women's rights. Scrawled on the paper was a name and an address. County Women's Federation, Helen Shaw. Accountant Zhao said that finding this Director Shaw would be more useful than running to the Civil Affairs Bureau yourself. I gripped the paper tightly, my eyes burning. In my past life, my father never knew the truth and thought I was living a good life. Even on his deathbed, he murmured, Sarah married an officer, she's living in bliss. In this life, I won't let him leave this world with such a misunderstanding. On the 3rd day, I went to the County Women's Federation. Helen Shaw was in her late 40s with short, ear-length hair. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word she spoke carried weight. I recounted the entire story from beginning to end. I didn't cry or make a scene. It was like I was delivering a formal report, laying out the dates, characters, and details with absolute clarity. Helen Shaw slammed her teacup down on the desk after listening to my story. The nerve of that scoundrel! She wasn't cursing at me. Sarah, do you have any proof? She asked. I don't have physical evidence yet, I replied. But Mary's husband, Joseph Reed, was killed in action in February 1979. Her eldest child was born in March 1981. There's a 2-year gap in between, unless she was pregnant for 24 months. Helen's pen stalled. She narrowed her eyes. How do you know the exact date Joseph Reed died? When I was studying in the city, I made a point of going to the archives to look it up. The first time Mary came to my house, I felt something was off. I just didn't dare to think in that direction back then. Helen Shaw looked at me for a long time. You're a smart woman. But I was a fool for 20 years in my past life, I said. Helen didn't understand that last remark, and she didn't pry. She stood up, searched through a cabinet, and pulled out a file folder. I'll help you with the divorce, but you need to do something for me first. Take this letter of introduction to Joseph Reed's old unit. Dig into the files and get his death certificate and the birth certificate of Mary's child. Bring back the proof in black and white, ink and paper that he can't deny. I nodded. I'll go. How much time do you have left for your job placement in the city? 9 days until the end of the month. There's still time. Helen finished writing the letter of introduction and handed it to me. When you're finished, come back to find me. I'll go with you to the unit's political department. I took the letter and stood up to bow. Helen waved me off. Don't thank me. Your situation isn't an isolated case in this county. There are far too many rotten things being covered up. On the 4th day, I spent an entire day on a long-distance bus to reach the unit where Joseph Reed had served. The clerk who received me was an officer named Mr. Miller. He looked over the letter and pulled the files. There it was, in black and white. Joseph Reed, killed in action on February 17, 1979. Mary's eldest daughter, Chloe, was born on March 4, 1981, exactly 2 years and 1 month apart. I copied these 2 dates into my notebook. Mr. Miller stood nearby, his expression shifting slightly. "Why are you looking this up?" "Family business," I said. He didn't ask further. But as I stood up to leave, he suddenly called out to me. "There's something. I don't know if I should say it." I stopped. Years ago, when Mary came to collect the pension, an officer was with her. That officer claimed to be Joseph's comrade in arms, a man named Miller. David Miller. Mary was heavily pregnant at the time, and that Miller fellow had his arm around her shoulders the whole time. We all assumed they were husband and wife. I gripped my notebook so hard my knuckles turned white. In my past life, I had lived timidly in that house for 20 years while everyone else knew the truth. I was the only one kept in the dark. "Thank you," I said. On the way back, the bus jolted violently. Outside the window were vast stretches of yellow earth and sparse rows of poplar trees. I leaned against the glass, feeling surprisingly calm. In my past life, learning the truth felt like the world was ending. In this life, these facts were merely the cards I needed to play to make my exit. I arrived back in the county on the evening of the 5th day and went straight to the Women's Federation. After Helen Shaw looked over the documents I brought back, she slapped the table. "Solid evidence. The day after tomorrow, I'm going with you to the unit's political department." When I got back to my parents' house, my mother told me David had come by with his orderly, aggressively demanding that I return home. "And then what happened?" I asked. "Your father chased them half a block with a carrying pole. They couldn't get away fast enough." I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. In my past life, when David came to fetch me, my father would slaughter a chicken to welcome him, thinking his son-in-law was an honorable officer and his daughter's lifelong support. Now that he knew the truth, a carrying pole was more useful than a chicken. My mother sat by the stove, still wiping away tears and muttering, "A married daughter is like water poured out." My father, who was peeling an apple for Lily, cut her off. "What do you mean, water poured out? My daughter is living water. If one hole can't hold her, she'll flow out and find a bigger river." Lily bit into the apple and piped up, "Grandpa is right. Mommy is a big river." The whole family laughed. It was the first time since my rebirth that I laughed from the bottom of my heart. On the 7th day, Helen Shaw led me to the unit's political department. We didn't go to the Miller house. We went straight to the organization. Director Brooks of the political department was a veteran officer in his 50s. After reviewing the documents, he remained silent for a long time. "Are you certain you want to take this step?" He looked at me. "David Miller has just been awarded a 3rd-class merit. Director Brooks, his merit is his merit, and his fault is his fault." My voice wasn't loud, but not a single word trembled. Merit and fault cannot cancel each other out. Helen Shaw added from the side, "This is a clear violation of marriage laws. The evidence is irrefutable. We cannot look the other way just because he has achievements." Director Brooks sighed and sent someone to call David. 20 minutes later, David pushed the door open and walked in. Clearly, he hadn't known I was there. His footsteps faltered the moment he saw me. Then his eyes fell on Helen Shaw, and the documents spread out on the desk. His face darkened inch by inch. "Sarah, you've brought this mess all the way to the political department?" His tone was icy, a controlled simmer of rage. In my past life, hearing that tone would have made my knees go weak. In this life, I sat perfectly still. "I'm not making a mess. I'm here to finalize the divorce." "I don't agree." David barked the words out, almost as a reflex. Director Brooks cleared his throat and pushed the documents toward him. "David, take a look for yourself." David lowered his head and skimmed through the papers. The color drained from his face, inch by inch, until he looked like a ghost. Joseph Reed's death certificate, the birth certificate of Mary's child, the written testimony from the clerk at the old unit. The timeline was laid out in black and white, clear and irrefutable. He looked up at me, his lips trembling, but he couldn't find a single word to say. I had known David for 10 years, but this was the first time I had ever seen him look like this. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't impatience. It was a raw, naked terror, like a man being stripped bare in the middle of a crowd. "When did you dig all this up?" He managed to choke out. "Does it matter?" I asked him. He opened his mouth to speak, then suddenly turned toward Director Brooks, his voice dropping to a low plea. Director, this is a family matter. Can we perhaps... David Miller, Director Brooks interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a heavy weight. Are you worthy of that merit medal on your chest? Silence hung in the room for a full 30 seconds. Helen Shaw pulled the divorce settlement agreement from her bag and placed it on the desk. Sign it, I said. We have nothing left to talk about. David didn't sign it immediately. He gripped the file folder so hard his knuckles turned white. Finally, through gritted teeth, he forced out, "Give me 2 days." I wanted to refuse. In my past life, every "wait a little longer" from him was just a tactic to stall. Stalling until my heart softened. Stalling until I compromised. Stalling until I rotted away in that yard. But Director Brooks spoke up first. 2 days? Not a second more. Helen Shaw glanced at me, and I nodded. It wasn't because I was softening. It was because there were still 5 days left until the end of the month. I had plenty of time. As we walked out of the political department, the courtyard was flooded with blinding white sunlight. David chased after me, stopping 3 paces behind. Sarah, I didn't turn around. What exactly do you want? I stopped walking but kept my back to him. I'm taking Lily with me. My teaching assignment is still waiting. I'm going back to the city to teach, and Lily is coming with me. I don't want a single cent from you. No, David's voice went up an octave. Lily is a child of the Miller family. Lily is my daughter. I turned my head to look at him. You want the child? Fine, go back and ask Mary who the 2 she birthed for you actually belong to. If you dare to claim them in court, you can fight me for Lily all you want. David's Adam's apple bobbed. I knew he didn't dare. Acknowledging Mary's children was equivalent to a public confession that he had deceived the organization for years. His 3rd-class merit would turn into a disciplinary discharge, and he'd be stripped of his uniform instantly. I'm leaving with Lily in 5 days, I said, and then I walked away without looking back. There was no sound of footsteps chasing after me. Just like in my past life, he never chased me. The difference was that in this life, I no longer cared. When I reached my parents' house, I was surprised to see someone standing at the gate. It was Mary. She was clutching her 7-month-old belly, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were swollen and red. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward. Sister-in-law, how could you go to the political department to report him? Do you have any idea that David will be disciplined because of this? I took a step back to avoid her reaching hands. Whether he's disciplined or not is none of my business. Mary choked up, and her tears began to flow. Her voice took on that soft, aggrieved tone that I had heard for 20 years. Sister-in-law, I know you hate me, but I had no other choice. Joseph is gone, and I was raising a child alone. David was just being kind and looking after me. In my past life, every time I heard this logic, my heart would soften. The relative of a martyr, a widow and an orphan. They had no choice. Those words were like heavy hats placed on my head, crushing me until I couldn't breathe. I used to think that if I wasn't generous, I was being undignified and unkind, unworthy of being an officer's wife. But I had been generous for 20 years, and what did it get me? It got my daughter a piece of cold bread. It got me a stomach full of leftover soup and terminal cancer. It got Mary wearing my apron in my kitchen, spending the money I saved to buy new clothes for her children. Mary, I said, my voice perfectly calm. Joseph died in 79. Your eldest daughter was born in 81. Do you want to do the math for me? You say Joseph was your husband, yet you got pregnant with his comrade's child while he went to collect the pension. Are you worthy of him? Mary's tears seemed to freeze midair. Sister-in-law, let me explain. No need for explanations. I pushed the gate open to go inside. You and David can figure things out yourselves. Don't come looking for me again. As I closed the gate, I heard Mary wailing outside. My mother poked her head out from the kitchen, looking like she wanted to say something, then thought better of it. I calmly went into the kitchen to wash my hands, rinse the rice, and light the stove. Lily crouched by the fire, helping me feed the wood. The glow of the flames cast a warm light on her small face. Mary cried outside for about 15 minutes, but when no one came out to pay her any mind, the sobbing gradually faded as she walked away. On the 8th day, David came. He came alone, without his orderly. He stood at the gate carrying a bag of apples and 2 rolls of fabric. My father, who was sitting in the yard weaving bamboo baskets, gave him a single glance but said nothing and didn't reach for his carrying pole. David entered the yard, set the apples and fabric on the table, and looked around until he found me. I was inside, teaching Lily to recognize characters. I had brought a first-grade textbook back from the city. Lily was hunched over the table, holding a pencil, carefully tracing the word for person, stroke by stroke. David stood at the door, watching the scene in silence. For some reason, David didn't speak immediately. It took a long moment before he finally said, "I need to talk to you. We can talk here. Lily being present won't affect anything." David hesitated for a second, but stepped inside anyway. He pulled up a chair and sat across from me, his hands clasped over his knees as he lowered his head. "Sarah, about Mary, I've done you wrong." I said nothing. In my past life, I had waited 20 years for those words. I had waited until the day he died and still never heard them. Now that he had finally said it, I realized I felt absolutely nothing. "But Mary truly had no other choice," David continued. "After Joseph passed, she was all alone." "David Miller," I cut him off. "If you're going to apologize, then apologize. Don't finish an apology just to start making excuses for her." He choked on his words. I continued, "I don't want to hear about Mary. I'm only asking you one thing. Are you signing the divorce papers or not? Lily stays with me. I don't want a dime from you. I don't want the house, and I don't want anything else. You go live your life with Mary, and I'll take my daughter back to the city. We'll have a clean break, and we'll never have anything to do with each other again." David looked up at me. It had been a very long time since I had sat across from him like this. There were strands of white in his hair at the temples, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were much deeper than they had been at this same point in my previous life. Perhaps he hadn't slept well these past few days. "Sarah, do you really not care about our past together at all?" I nearly laughed. "Our past? What past? Was it the past where he brought Mary into our home 3 years into our marriage? Was it the past where he used my wages to buy powdered milk for Mary? Or was it the past where he told me I lacked vision while Lily was having febrile convulsions?" "David, look at Lily." He followed my gaze. Lily was busy writing. She was too short to reach the tabletop, so she was kneeling on 2 bricks. The pencil in her hand was dull, and she was using a small knife to whittle it into a jagged point. She was wearing a padded cotton coat, one that I had brought with me when we married, which had been altered and were sewn so many times that the fabric at the cuffs was worn thin enough to see through. "Your daughter is 5 years old," I said. "She has never had a full bowl of chicken soup. She has never worn a brand new outfit. When she had a fever, the medicine in this house was prioritized for someone else's child. You want to talk to me about the past? You should talk to your daughter first." David's eyes fell on the 2 bricks under Lily's knees. His Adam's apple shifted slightly. Lily seemed to sense something. She looked up at David for a brief second, then quickly looked back down to continue her writing. She didn't call him Daddy. The room remained silent for a long time. Finally, David reached out and took the divorce papers from the table. I handed him a pen. He took it, his hand shaking violently. When he finished signing, the tip of the pen even tore through the paper. He set the papers down and stood up to go to the door. He paused for a moment. "Lily?" Lily didn't look up. David stood there for about 10 seconds, but in the end, he said nothing and walked away. I picked up the signed divorce agreement, folded it, and tucked it into my inner pocket. The paper still carried the warmth from his palm, but I felt no emotion whatsoever. On the 9th day, I took the papers to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The clerk looked at the signatures from both parties, then at the official seal from Director Brooks at the political department, and processed everything in silence. When he handed me the divorce certificate, he looked like he wanted to say something. "Sarah? Well, never mind. I wish you a good life ahead. I will have one." Leaving the bureau, the sunlight was blinding. I stood on the steps, opening the divorce certificate and folding it again. I folded it, then opened it once more. Finally, I tucked it safely against my chest along with my job placement letter. Passing by the state store, I went in and bought a new padded coat for Lily, red with a small floral pattern. The sales clerk was an enthusiastic woman who measured the coat repeatedly for me. "How old is your daughter?" 5. "This size might be a little loose, but kids grow fast." "Loose is fine," I said. "She's going to keep growing." When I got home and gave the coat to Lily, she touched it over and over, not daring to put it on. "Mommy, is this for me? Is it not for my sister?" The sister she referred to was Mary's eldest daughter. In the Miller house, every new thing went to her sister. Lily only ever got hand-me-downs. I knelt down and put the coat on her, carefully fastening the buttons. There is no sister anymore. From now on, all the good things belong to Lily. Lily looked down at her new clothes and suddenly burst into tears. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was the kind of joy that leaves you not knowing what to do with yourself. She clutched the sleeves of the coat, and as her tears fell, she was still smiling. I pulled her into my arms. In this life, I might not care about anyone else, but I will protect this child with my life. On the 10th day, I took Lily to the train station to buy tickets. The county station was tiny, with just one waiting room and 2 tracks. I stood in line for half an hour and bought 2 hard-seat tickets to the city. The train was scheduled for the day after tomorrow at 2:40 p.m. It would be an 18-hour trip. Just as I walked out of the station, I ran right into my mother-in-law. Behind her stood Mary and Mary's eldest daughter. The 3 of them blocked the station entrance. My mother-in-law's face was longer than a mule's. "Sarah, what do you think the Miller house is? A place you can just come and go as you please?" People nearby began to stare. In my past life, I would have been terrified of a scene like this, feeling so ashamed I'd want to crawl into a hole. In this life, I gripped Lily's hand a little tighter and looked at my mother-in-law calmly. "David and I are divorced. The paperwork is finished." My mother-in-law froze for a second, then exploded. "Divorce? Who gave you permission to divorce? I don't agree. I don't need your agreement." "You?" My mother-in-law was shaking with rage, reaching out to grab me. "You ungrateful brat. David treated you so well. How could you? How exactly did David treat me well?" My voice wasn't loud, but the crowd around us suddenly went pin-drop silent. The people buying tickets, those waiting for their trains, and even the folks sitting by the entrance cracking melon seeds. Everyone pricked up their ears to listen. 5 years of marriage," I began, my voice steady. "And he's been raising another woman in our house. The chicken soup, the eggs, the brown sugar, the brand new clothes. They all went to that woman's child first. When my daughter had a fever, and there was only 1 dose of medicine left in the house, you gave it to someone else's child. I rushed back from the city, an 18-hour trip, only to find not a single scrap of food left for me. Meanwhile, Mary's chicken soup was still steaming on the stove while my daughter sat in the kitchen, gnawing on cold bread. My mother-in-law's face shifted from bright red to a ghostly white. Mary ducked behind her, not daring to meet my eyes. "Now you're here to block my way because you're afraid that once I'm gone, there'll be no one left to wait hand and foot on Mary while she's in labor." Someone in the crowd let out a sharp, mocking laugh. My mother-in-law's lips trembled as she pointed a finger at me for a long time, but she couldn't squeeze out a single word. I pulled Lily along and weaved past them. After about a dozen steps, I heard Mary's voice behind us, faint and piteous. "Mom, sister-in-law, she." My mother-in-law snapped at her, cutting her off, but then she started screaming, not at Mary, but at me. "You heartless brat, you ungrateful white-eyed wolf." I didn't turn back. Lily looked up at me. "Mommy, Grandma's yelling at you." "Let her yell," I said with a small smile. "She'll feel better once she's done." On the 11th day, the day before we left, I did a final check of our belongings. There wasn't much: a cloth bag for clothes, a mesh bag for shoes, and Lily's books, and the bundle of cash and stamps my father had given me. We were traveling light. My mother spent the whole time in the kitchen, huddled over a tray of dumplings. From morning until noon, she made nearly 200 of them. "That's enough for 2 full meals on the way to the city," she muttered. "Mom, I can't carry that many." "You can," she said, her hands moving rapidly without her looking up. She wiped her eyes as she worked. My father spent the entire morning in the yard weaving a bamboo basket. When he finished the last one, he stood up and dusted off his hands. "For Lily's toys. Things are expensive in the city. This didn't cost a cent." The basket was exquisitely crafted, even more beautiful than the ones he usually made for customers, with a tiny bamboo flower twisted onto the handle. Lily hugged the basket and spun around in circles, ecstatic. "Grandpa is the best." My father grinned so wide his face was nothing but a map of overlapping wrinkles. My younger brother, Tim, came home early from the town. He was an apprentice at the supply store and had taken a half-day off. As soon as he walked in, he asked, "Sis, do you want me to take you to the station?" "No need, Dad is taking me tomorrow." "Then I'll help you carry the luggage." He looked at my meager pile of bags and scratched his head. "That's it. It's so little." "It's enough. They have everything in the city. The whole family sat down for a meal of dumplings. My mother had packed the pork and cabbage filling with plenty of fat. Lily ate 12 of them and finished with a satisfied burp. Finally, my mother couldn't take it anymore. She set down her chopsticks and wiped her tears. The city is so far away. You're taking the little one all by yourself. Mom, I'm a teacher, not an illiterate. Once I start teaching in the city and earn some money, they'll assign me a house. Then I'll bring you and Dad up to live with me. My brother tapped his bowl. That's right. My sister is a college graduate. She's going to be a teacher in the big city. My father didn't say a word. He just kept eating his dumplings, one per bite, very quickly. When he finished, he stood up and went into the yard. I followed him and saw him standing with his back to me, wiping his eyes. Dad, go on. You're gonna have a good life. He nodded, still not turning around. He paused, then added, I knew you were more capable than your old man. The 12th day, departure day. The train was at 2:40 p.m. My father borrowed a neighbor's donkey cart to take Lily and me to the station. My mother sat on the cart, clutching the 200 dumplings tightly, afraid the jolting would ruin them. My brother ran behind the cart, refusing to get on. I'll run. It's good exercise. When we reached the station, the green train was already idling at the platform. My father helped carry our bags on and found our seats. He stood at the carriage door, looking at Lily and me as we sat down. Send a telegram home when you get to the city. I will. If you're short on money, write a letter. Don't be too frugal. Eat what you need to eat, wear what you need to wear. I will. He stood there for a moment, then suddenly leaned down and gave Lily a hug. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck. Grandpa? He patted her back, his nose turning red, but he didn't let any tears fall. I'm off then. He stood up straight and turned to head off the train. A long whistle echoed, and the train slowly began to roll. My mother ran alongside the train for a few steps before my brother pulled her back. My father didn't chase after us. He stood perfectly still, holding the reins of the empty donkey cart, watching the train fade into the distance. Only when the platform was no longer visible did I look away from the window. Lily sat beside me, gnawing on a dumpling held in both hands. Mommy, why are you crying? Just the wind, I said, wiping my eyes and smiling, even though the window was closed. I'm just so happy I'm crying. Outside the window, the yellow earth receded. That small county grew further and further away. The courtyard that had locked me in for a lifetime grew further away. That man grew further away. Good. Stay away. We arrived in the city the next morning. After 18 hours in a hard seat, my back was aching, but my spirit was incredibly high. Lily had slept on my lap all night. As we got off the train, she rubbed her eyes and stared at the tall buildings of the city, her mouth hanging open. Mommy, the houses are so tall. They'll be even taller later on. I went straight to the teacher's college to report to the dean. When he saw me, he pushed up his glasses. Sarah, I thought you weren't coming. I'm here. He flipped through the assignment board and put a check mark next to my name. 7th High School. You'll be teaching language arts. Report there next Monday. Use these few days to get settled in the dormitory. The dorm was a single room, about 12 square meters in a tenement-style building with a shared kitchen and bathroom. But it had a bed, a desk, and a window. The window faced south, and the sunlight streaming in was warm. Lily walked in a circle around the room. Lily was so happy she jumped onto the bed. Mommy, is all of this ours? Everything? Everything is ours. I set down our luggage and began making the bed. I placed the container of dumplings on the windowsill and tucked the bamboo basket my father had woven at the foot of the bed. I folded Lily's new padded coat and placed it inside the basket, then headed to the communal kitchen to boil a kettle of water. I served 2 bowls of hot dumpling broth, and we sat in our 12-square-meter room, sipping the steaming liquid while looking out the window at the unfamiliar city. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I truly felt like my life belonged to me. A month later, I received a letter. It was from David Miller. It was a long letter, 3 pages of scrawled handwriting, mostly expressing his deep regret. He said he hadn't handled the situation with Mary well, and that he wanted to come to the city to visit Lily. The end of the letter read, Sarah, I know I've failed you, but we were husband and wife for 5 years. Lily is still young and needs a complete family. Won't you come back? I'll send Mary away, and we can start over from the beginning. I turned the pages over and read the letter twice. In my past life, I would have dreamed of hearing those words. If he had said them 5 years earlier, I probably would have cried and run back to him. But he hadn't. He only remembered how to write those words after he had lost everything. I folded the letter, pressed it under a book, and then pulled out a sheet of stationery to reply. I wrote only 2 words, no need. After mailing that letter, I never received another one from David. Later, I heard bits and pieces of news from others. Mary had given birth to a son, and he was David's. Someone in the unit had reported David. It wasn't me, but a neighbor of Mary's, a woman named Mrs. Reed. Living so close to Mary, she had seen everything. David was disciplined, and his 3rd-class merit was revoked. Mary took her 2 children back to her home village, and David was discharged from the military and transferred to a local job. He was assigned to a factory in the county as a deputy workshop manager. Later, when the wave of layoffs hit in the 90s, the factory went bankrupt and he lost his job. I heard he lived alone in his old house, his hair more than half white, becoming eccentric and reclusive. By the time this news reached my ears, I was at my home in the city, grading student essays. Lily was in the 8th grade. She had finally caught up to her peers in height. She wore her hair in a ponytail, and when she laughed, her eyes curved into crescents. She received academic awards every year. I had raised her well, and I was living well myself. At school, I had earned a senior faculty title. The graduating classes I led consistently ranked 1st in the district. I had been assigned a 2-bedroom apartment facing south with a balcony. On that balcony grew a jasmine plant from seeds my mother had sent. My parents had eventually moved to the city to live with me. My brother Tim had worked at the supply store for several years, saved up some money, and caught the wave of economic reform to open a grocery store in town. Later, he rented a storefront, and his business flourished. My whole family was doing wonderful. In the winter of 1998, I received a phone call. It was David. I almost didn't recognize his voice. It was hoarse and thin, sounding like a rusty door hinge. "Sarah, it's me?" I was silent for a moment. "Is something wrong? Is Lily okay?" he asked. "She's very well." There was a long silence on the other end, so long I thought he had hung up. Then he spoke. "I saw it in the newspaper. Your school received a National Excellence Award. There was a photo of you. You look much better than before." I didn't say anything. "Sarah, the thing I regret most in this life." "There's no need to say it," I cut him off. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear it. It was just unnecessary. Everything was in the past. "David, take care of yourself." I hung up and stood by the window watching the snow fall for a while. The snow in the city was heavier than in the county, flakes drifting down until the entire street was draped in white. Lily pushed the door open and walked in, snowflakes still clinging to her scarf. "Mommy, who was on the phone?" "A wrong number." Lily unwrapped her scarf and hung it on the coat rack. "Mom, what's for dinner?" "I want dumplings." "Pork and cabbage? With plenty of fat, the way Grandma makes them?" I smiled and turned toward the kitchen to knead the dough, roll the wrappers, and mix the filling. Outside, the snow fell thicker and thicker. Inside, the kitchen was warm with rising steam. Lily was hunched over the dining table doing her homework while the radio played the year's most popular songs. The warmth of the heater made our faces flush. The jasmine on the balcony bloomed quietly, its small white flowers releasing a faint fragrance. Life moved on. These days without David Miller were better than anything I could have ever imagined.